Good morning, everyone. This is BritSimon. So I've got a couple of videos that I want to create, and I think I'll post them as a sort of a part 1 and part 2 this morning. They're both about a similar topic or a topic that's being discussed on Twitter at the moment. The first thing I want to make clear is the flow of the process through the DV lottery process. There's some confusion going around the moment. Various people, including Curtis, are confused about a particular point in time when it's no longer possible to update your DS260 or change your embassy or anything like that. And I want to make clear in the process when that happens. There's some misunderstanding based on what happened in DV 2021. And so I want to clear that up. The second thing I want to do, and it relates to that same topic, is how you move your case from one embassy to another, particularly for the people that find themselves without a suitable embassy because the embassy is closed. For example, that's the case in Cuba, that's the case in Afghanistan, it's the case in Iraq, and so on. There are several embassies that, for one reason or another, are closed. And the government have been good about, some of those embassies, but not good in a number of those embassies in explaining to people how they will be interviewed. Okay. And again, during 2021, DV 2021, I should say, that caused people problems, which I'm hoping won't be as bad in DV 2022 and beyond. But of course, it's wise to understand the procedure and also be able to react to how things actually are happening because of the situation right now. Okay, so these two videos, I think you need to see, in a connected way. But the first that I'm going to go through is the process flow of the lottery process. Now, I've created a diagram. I think many of you already know this, but there may be some nuances in this process that you may not understand, or you may not understand some of the reasoning behind things, and perhaps I can clear some of that up with this diagram. So I'm going to show this diagram, and let's see, I want to make this actually pretty big. Yeah, let's make this big. That should be good. Okay, so here we have a diagram, right? And I'll switch over. I'm going to be looking away from the camera. I'm sorry about this, but let me just go over here. Yeah. So I'm going to go through this diagram that's going to sort of show you the complete flow. And I've got a few things to show you. I'm going to show you the flow all the way from end to end, and also some of the emails and the timeline that you'll see in the process. Okay. So the first thing I want to sort of focus on is the very beginning of the process. In DV 2022, you're probably already past this process, but these are important things that you need to think of. You find out you're selected. That the day that you find out you're selected is normally available from May each year. So if you're entering DV 2023 right now, then you're not going to find out whether you've been selected or not until May. But in May, typically, sometimes in June, as we saw in DV 2021, you'll find out you've been selected. You should then think about, before you do anything else, you should think about, can you meet the requirements? Okay. If you can't meet the requirements, actually, there should be a no box here. But if you can't meet the requirements, you shouldn't go any further. If you cannot meet the education requirements or work experience requirement, which is an alternative to the education, if you entered with incorrect information, for example, you left your spouse or a child off of the application, you just shouldn't go any further. Because if you submit your DS260, that can be used as a factor against you when you're applying for a non-immigrant visa in the future, as having displayed immigrant intent. Okay, so you don't want to fill out your DS260 until you're sure that you meet the requirements and you haven't made a fatal mistake so far in the process. But then at that point, you're going to complete and submit your DS260. You do that electronically, you do it online, you don't upload any documents with the DS260 typically. That's just done online, okay? And if you're following the instructions, you'll know that at a later point, you have to upload some documents. Now, you can either do that proactively or you can wait to be told. Either way is fine. You can, and in my opinion, you should send your documents as early as possible. There's no reason any longer to not do that, because the police certificate, for example, is now valid for 2 years. So you can send all of your documents. A birth certificate, my birth certificate is 50 something years old. It's fine because I was only born one time, right? And so some documents naturally age, and that's not a problem. They're still considered valid. Marriage certificates are the same thing. Your passport needs to be current, and your police certificates need to be relatively recent, but they are accepted up to 2 years old, and they can even be accepted older than that if you've not returned to the country that the police certificate concerns. Okay, but anyway, back to the flow. You complete the DS260, and KCC. Get that this line here and this sort of pink color is KCC activities, right? This is you in the yellow color. KCC process the DS260, and they're doing that in date received order. I created a video about that just recently. I've had some interesting discussions with people just recently. That piece is absolutely by the order in which the DS260s are received. It's not it's not the correct way of doing it, in my opinion, but nevertheless, that's what they do, okay? And when they've completed processing of that DS260, they will then request the documents from you, okay? And as I say, you can wait to be asked if you want, but if you wait to be asked, you're basically leaving it in the hands of KCC, to decide when they ask for the documents, and that could affect the processing of your case. If it were me, if it were my case, I would be sending documents proactively. So one way or the other, you're going to submit the documents, either because you've been asked or because you've been proactive about it, okay? And KCC will process the documents in case number order. This confuses people. I know, I understand. Many of you probably disagree with this or whatever, but if you disagree with this, you're wrong. This is how it works, right? So the DS260 is processed in date submitted order, and the documents are processed in case number order. And yes, I know there are some high case numbers, and I've explained all of that in a previous video, so I'm not going to go into that again now. But this is the process, okay? Now the timeline, when you send your DS260, you sometimes are told, and if you get an email from them, they'll talk about it takes 6 weeks to process your DS260. That's bullshit. That's nonsense. You can ignore that. Basically, it depends on a few factors. Your DS260, the length of time it will take to process varies case to case. It also will vary depending on how many DS260s they've got to work through. There could be a delay before they start working on it. If they had no backlog and you had a very, very simple case to process, the DS260 can be processed in a few days. But many people wait weeks and months for their DS260 to be processed, okay? So don't assume that 6 weeks timeline that they talk about is realistic. It's not a realistic timeline. It's not true. It's not based on any fact, and it's certainly not something we can hold them accountable to. There is no part of the law that says they have to process that DS260 in 6 weeks, okay? When they send the request for documents, if they already have your documents and your case number is low, then they will immediately process your documents as soon as they have them. Again, the processing of documents, the timeline varies for that because it varies because not all documents are the same, right? If you're interviewing in a country where the official language is Arabic, and therefore you don't need translations for your documents, but you send your documents to KCC, who is in Kentucky. I promise you, they don't know how to speak Arabic. They don't know how to read Arabic. So you need to make very clear what your documents are, right? It's the birth certificate, it's the police certificate, or whatever it is, in the naming convention that you use in the documents. That's the smart thing to do. But if they have to check your documents, then they've got to send that document to someone else to get verification. Is this a birth certificate I'm looking at? Is this a police certificate I'm looking at? It's in Arabic. I don't know, right? That's going to be their reaction. They're not used to seeing documents from every country in the world, in every language in the world, and so that can take extra time for them to process the documents. Okay. Now, at the end of processing the documents, you become documentarily qualified. And I'll show you the emails that are being sent out at these various stages in a few moments. But you're documentarily qualified, or DQ'd at that point. I used to call this ready for scheduling, based on one of the emails that came out. But I think most people know this as DQ right now. So I've switched my terminology to being DQ, documentarily qualified. That's when your DS-260 and your documents have been reviewed and processed, and you've done everything you need to do at that point. You just need to wait for your interview. The question then is your case current? Nothing will happen, no matter how early you get DQ, if your case number is not current. Okay, you can't be scheduled for an interview until your case number is current. Okay. So if it's not current, you just have to wait. If it is current, KCC, this is a nuance in the step that I think I need to point out here. KCC, first of all, allocates your case to an embassy based on either what you've selected in the DS-260 or as an override to that, and I mean an override to that, based on what KCC thinks should be your embassy based on your resident address. Okay, let me just say that again. KCC care more about where you live and what address you have on the DS-260 in terms of selecting the embassy for you than your selection on the DS-260 form. Okay, it's important because you might think you can pick any embassy in the world. You actually can't. They're going to schedule you based on your resident address, unless you have some very good reason to be processed in some other country. Okay. All right. So KCC will allocate your case to an embassy, and at that point, a visa number is assigned to your case, and this is the important point. Once that visa number is assigned to your case, it's allocated both to the region. It's counted towards the quota both to the region and also to the embassy that you've been assigned to. Okay, and so from this point, when KCC allocate your case to the embassy, you can no longer unlock your DS-260. You cannot change your embassy at that point. Okay, KCC sends the 2NL email normally shortly after that. In a normal year, the allocation to an embassy would be done in the early part of any given month, and the 2NL would be sent in the middle of the month, right, immediately after or shortly after the visa bulletin for that month. So there's a few days difference. In DV 2021, that difference became very long, right, because there were lots of people lined up for interviews at embassies. The embassies had limited amount of capacity because of the Tier 4 prioritization, or because they were closed or whatever. And so people were being allocated to an embassy, therefore unable to change their DS-260 or their embassy selection. And but the embassy weren't taking up their case, and that period of time became longer. And this is why Curtis Morrison thinks that it's impossible to change your embassy location after you've been documentarily qualified. It's not after being documentarily qualified, it's after your case has been allocated to the embassy. That's the point. So the period of time between DQ, which is at the end of this point, and the case being allocated to the embassy, in normal times, in a normal year, That could be months. Okay, and during that time, you're still able to make changes to your DS260 if you unlock and ask them to do so. And you could, in theory, change your embassy. You'd have to ask KCC to do that, but it is possible to do that, right? And so that's the point that I think Curtis Morrison is misunderstanding. And others as well. Sorry, Curtis, I don't mean to pick on you, but there are others who are misunderstanding as well, right? And I'm part of why I'm doing this video is to try and explain why that's an incorrect understanding. Okay, so then KCC send the 2NL. I call this the 2NL. Again, some people call the document request the 2NL. That's incorrect. The 2NL is the second notification letter. It's a letter. It's a letter that appears on the ESC page, and it's the second letter that appears on the ESC page. Okay, there are two. The first one is the letter that says, "Congratulations, you've been selected." Okay, and the second letter is then replaced over that letter. You don't see the first letter anymore when you get your 2NL. So if you want that 1NL, the "Congratulations, you've been selected," if you want that letter, you have to download that letter before your 2NL arrives. Okay, you'll when you get your 2NL, the 2NL is actually an email that says, "Go and check the ESC page for updates." And when you get to the ESC page, which is where you went originally to find out you were a winner, you'll find your original letter has been replaced with another letter, and that second letter is an official letter that gives you notification about your interview schedule. The email didn't have any information. The email simply said, "Go and check," right? So so you log into the ESC page, excuse me, and you see your 2NL. Okay. There is normally about 6 to 8 weeks, roughly, between receiving the 2NL and having the interview. It varies a little bit. In DV 2021 and in DV 2020, because of the lawsuits and because of the urgency, that time frame became reduced massively to a few days in some cases, to 24 hours in some cases. It was like people were receiving 2NLs telling them they had an interview the next morning. I mean, it was crazy times. But in normal times, that should be about a 6 to 8 week period, right? So if you were getting interviewed in December, sometime in December, from the 1st to the 31st of December, you could receive in normal times, you would receive that 2NL in October. Okay. The latter part of October is when that would normally come. Okay. So when you get your 2NL, that's when you gather the rest of your documents. When you sent your original documents, you didn't send them your education document. You didn't send them the I-134. There's some documents, some other proof that you would take to an interview that you didn't take to you didn't send to the KCC when they asked for documents, right? So you prepare all the documents that you're going to take to the interview, and you can take to the interview any documentation that you feel helps your case, right? It could be all sorts of things. It could be information about your work experience. It could be photos for proving your relationship was genuine because you got married after the results. It could be all sorts of things, right? So that's when you prepare all of your documents and you schedule your medical. Okay. During this period of time where you're getting the documents together and you're scheduling your medical, the embassy might communicate with you. That's what I've shown down here. They might do. They don't always. Some embassies do, some don't. And if they communicate with you, it would normally be by email. Bearing in mind that the 2NL point is when the case is sent to the embassy. The KCC are basically done with your case at that point, and they've handed over control of your case to the embassy, right? So, as I say, they may communicate with you, but there are instructions specific to every embassy through the official instructions. So go and have a look at that if you can. Then you have your interview. Your interview lasts about 5 minutes. It's a really short interview. Some people are very shocked about that. It can be 10 minutes, it can be 15, but generally speaking, it's a very short interview with very few questions. It's a very informal process. It's not as laborious as some other types of interview. During your interview, perhaps you will possibly be approved. You can be told right there and then that you're being approved. It doesn't normally work that way. You can also be told that you're being refused in that interview, or you can be told that you may be told that everything looks good and they're just going to check some things. And then you'll find out that you're on a status called administrative processing, or AP. And AP is a period of time when they're doing some additional checks, possibly. It could be that you're missing a document, that you didn't take a document that you needed to the interview. And so they tell you, look, you need to give us that document, proof of finances, proof of education, whatever document you missed out. You would have that period of time to produce that. And so AP, the period of time when AP lasts varies. It varies by case. There are certain countries, and Iran is probably the most obvious example, where that period of AP, because there is additional background checks going on according to the FBI name check process, that period of time can take longer, and it can take months. Okay, so you need to be aware of that in certain countries. If you're a male in Iran, for example, where you've probably performed military service or you were expected to, then that period of time can be a long time. That AP period can be a long time. It's quite common, by the way, to see an AP period, even if your case is fully approved. You'll see your case will go into AP for 24 hours, 48 hours, a very short period of time. But if it lasts longer than 48 hours, let's say 72 hours, that probably means that you're on real AP for some reason, a missing document or some additional background checks. Okay, so in the interview, you could be refused. You could say you're approved and your visa will be issued, or you can go on to AP. And at some point, hopefully the AP would be approved and you would get your visa issued. It is obviously possible to go into AP and then be refused as well. Okay. And then when your visa is issued, your visa will be issued with a validity date, which is based on the date of your medical, and an additional 6 months. So if you interview a week after your medical, then you will have almost 6 months minus a week to enter the USA. That will be the validity of your visa. If, on the other hand, for some reason you have your medical, let's say, 2 months early before your interview, for whatever reason, because your interview gets delayed or something like that, it will reduce the amount of time that you have to enter the USA after you get your visa. Okay, so please be aware of that. Don't have your medical too soon. So it's the medical date plus 6 months. You've got that time. Okay, so that's the flow, end-to-end flow. Okay, and then I want to talk about the timeline and the emails and timeline that you're going to see as well. And it's somewhat related to this flow, but let's just sort of talk through this. Now, let me put this at the top, and hopefully you can see this fairly clear. I think I'm going to have to sort of zoom in a little bit. These are sort of in order, but depending on your actions, whether you email KCC, you may get more examples of these same emails. There's a couple of examples, right? So first thing that people ask me about is the DS260 confirmation. When you submit your DS260, a lot of people, not everyone, but a lot of people receive an email which is their confirmation. Okay, there's a confirmation number when you submit the DS260. It's available there at the end of the DS260. It's on the last page, and you've got a confirmation number. That's all you really need. But some people also receive an email, saying that their DS260 was submitted successfully. That's not necessary. It's not necessary as a part of the process. So don't worry if you don't get it. But some people get it. Okay. Now, the rest of the emails I'm about to tell you generally come out in this order, but not everybody will get every one of these emails, depending on what goes on in your case, right? First one that you will you'll receive is when you've sent in your DS260, you're going to get this one, and this confirmation is similar to this. These two are sort of related. So you'll see an email sometimes that says your forms have been received and are currently processing, allow several weeks, blah, blah, blah. If you want to see the emails, I've actually got them in my FAQ on my blog. Okay, so you can go and have a look at those. When the DS260 is completed processing, they're going to send you an email, one of these two emails here, which is one of the emails starts, the Kentucky Consular Center, KCC, has completed processing of your DS260, and then they go on to ask you for documents. The other version of that is, now that your application, it has a section where it says, now that your application form has been submitted, you should review the list of required documents for processing below. And again, I've got that document, that email and that list of documents on my website, on my blog. Okay. Sometimes after you submit your documents, so sorry, I should say these two emails here basically are a clue that your DS260 is fully processed and you need now to send in the documents. Okay, so if we just sort of compare where that is, it would be about this timeline: KCC request documents. If I were to draw a line, the line would be kind of like there, right? That's the timeline. Okay, that's where we are in the process. During this time, you can also be asked to provide additional documents, right? And the additional documents are because you're missing a document that they expect you to have. That is based on a review of your DS260. So Curtis yesterday was asking me, do I have proof that that there is some sort of processing of the DS260? He thinks it's done by the people that review the documents. It isn't. That's incorrect. His understanding is incorrect. It's a separate process. It is this period of time which takes, in theoretically 6 weeks for them to process the DS260. It's not 6 weeks, but that's what they say. And during that period of time, one of the things they're doing is they're checking the DS260 to figure out what documents you should have. And that list of documents will be provided to the documents team, who then will review the documents you sent and said, okay, on the DS260, it shows I should have, a birth certificate and a passport for these 3 applicants. I should also have a marriage certificate. The spouse was previously married, so I need to have a divorce certificate for the spouse. And they've got 3 kids, and so I need to see a passport and birth certificate for those kids. And they've lived in these countries. So I need to see all of these police certificates for the spouse and for the main selectee, right? And for anybody over the age of 16, including children. They also need a child over the age of 16 could have to submit police certificates as well. Now, it's only possible to know what's missing from the DS260, in terms of documents, missing from the document set, if you've done the review of the DS260. And that review is fairly important. It's also when the first of the checks are run, and there are some things called the FBI name checks. I've got a document on my blog that explains that. There are various types of name checks that are run. You'll hear code names like Condor, and what are some of the code names? I can't remember all the code names now, but there are various code names that relate to name checks that are required for certain cases. So those name checks can happen as early as DS260 submission time. Okay, so you may be asked for further documents. Once your documents are processed, you'll receive this email that says, and this is an important one, so I'll spend time on this. It says, congratulations, our records indicate that your case is ready to be scheduled for an interview when your case number becomes current and appointments are available. Okay, so that effectively is your notice that you are ready for scheduling or documentarily qualified. That's the point at which that's the point at which your DQ That's an important point in this process. The Curtis's belief, as I mentioned earlier, is that at that point, if I did another one, let me just move that over. Right, so this DQ point is effectively there, right? So in fact, I should say that's that, right? So they process the case, and there's the timeline, right? This period of time when you're documentarily qualified, you're waiting for your case number to be current, typically in a typical year. It was different in DV 2021 because all cases became current pretty much before any processing happened. And so that really screwed things up. I told people when they made all regions current, I said this will be chaos. There was all sorts of chaos. And every time I was asked about why has this happened, I said, well, I told you there would be chaos. There was chaos because they made all the regions current, and that wasn't a wise thing to do. It wasn't the right thing to do in some ways. It was good for some cases, but it wasn't the right thing to do. And it was based on false information. It was wrong information. Anyway, so when you're documentarily qualified, you have to wait to become current in a normal year, right? Now, then the case gets allocated, and I need another arrow just to show you where we are. Let's do this one, right? Then the case gets allocated to an embassy, and in a normal year, you would rarely see this email that I'm pointing out here. This email says your case number is now current for interview processing. Starts off that way, and actually it goes on to say that you cannot unlock your DS260, you can't, KCC can't make changes, etc., because you're current for interview processing. It's the point at which you've been allocated to an embassy, but the embassy don't yet have your case, okay? And KCC is sort of holding your case, but they've assigned it to an embassy. This is the danger zone that Curtis is trying to make people aware of. All right, he misunderstands when that happens, but he's correct in pointing out that there is this danger zone, right? During that time period between this point and let's do this one, right? The next one is the 2NL, that's this one. So the 2NL is when you get your interview schedule. It's the updates available on the ESC page. That's what the email says. Between those 2 points, you can't do anything with your case. Now, normally, that period of time lasts a few days, as I described earlier. It's the time period where you've been allocated to an embassy, but the 2NL hasn't yet been sent. So you're not quite there yet, and you can't discuss with the embassy yet. And it was a mess last year because that period of time became much longer than it should have been. And during that time period, people are unable to unlock their DS260. They're not able to change their embassy. It's a problem. But normally that's such a short period of time, a few days normally, that isn't a problem. It was only last year that was a problem. It may be the case that becomes a problem again this year with the prioritization scheme that the government is still operating. Okay, but we have to wait and see if that's the case or not. Okay, so then those are the main emails. I haven't pointed out all the emails I know of, but I'm giving you the flavor of what the emails mean and the timeline when they fit into the process, and I hope that's helpful for you. And then, if they're really from the embassy, there may be a communication from the embassy. That would be by email. When you get your visa, that's not really an email, that's a package you get. Obviously you may get it from a courier, so the emails at that point are not really part of the process. So that's it in terms of the process. That's the process flow. That's the emails and how they fit into the timeline, and the activities that both you and KCC do. My level of confidence that this is the process is extremely high. Okay, so I know some people want to challenge this, but really you're wasting your time. This is the right the right flow. This is how things work. Okay, I would love to go into KCC and do an evaluation of their processes, etc. I haven't ever done that, but I've been working with DV Lottery for 8 years. I've seen it operate in good years and bad years. During the bad years and even during the good years, I've been able to read a lot about the declarations of people running the process, etc. There was a lawsuit in 2012 that gave us a lot of information. There's been lawsuits in 2020 and 2021 that gave us a lot of information. And I read all of those things. And I also put information together through common sense, frankly, or what I think of as common sense. But it's a business process. And I do business processes for a living. So I kind of understand this one. And actually, anybody who's in my same business is probably looking at my chart saying, "What the hell is that? This isn't how I would do things for my work, obviously." But I felt this was probably a better way to describe things. Anyway, I'm hoping that's interesting and helpful for you to understand when you can do things, and particularly this sort of danger zone. Let me just highlight that danger zone a second. So let's see if I put that here. This is danger, right? Danger. So that's not even how you spell danger, but anyway. So that's the danger period in a sense. And as I say, that's normally a few days, but last year was a lot longer period of time. And this is the point that that Curtis is talking about, right? This point here. So that's why he's talking about that. Okay, I'm hoping that was helpful for you. Oh, I've got to now move over here. It's very confusing. Yeah, I'm hoping that graphic was helpful for you. What I'll now do is create part 2 of this video where I'm going to discuss, now you know when you can change your embassy, etc., or when you can't. I'm going to now discuss how you change your embassy for some of the people that, particularly in some of these embassies where the embassy is closed, or not communicating and so on. I'll tell you, my thoughts about that, but that'll be a part 2. So this flow stands in its own right. Okay. All right, everybody. Thank you. Thanks for joining. Please do make sure, by the way, that you're subscribed to my channel. Give me a thumbs up, like on this video if you like this. If you don't like it, give me a thumbs down. Let me know why. Let me know your comments. I'd love to know your feedback. All right. Okay, everybody. Thank you. Bye-bye.